of times people believe that domestic violence happens to less affluent or economically challenged individuals, and that's not the case. You actually have very affluent women and men getting trapped in domestic violence relationships. And that was my case. I was very unaware of what I was going through. So when he kept telling me that I had triggered him, that it was my fault, I really believed that it was. And I ended up staying with him for 4 years.
Wow, just 4 months, and then boom, the violence kind of started. Was there anything before the 4 months? Like, was he controlling? Was he wanting to look at your phone? Where are you going? What are you doing?
He was very controlling in that manner. And when the emotional manipulation and psychological manipulation started, I was unaware of it because I never saw it in my family. My mom and my dad were the love story of our town.
You were like, well, I'm doing something wrong here. What am I doing wrong? What could I do better? And also, I think you told me you were living a pretty glamorous life.
I was even yelled at oftentimes by him for spending over $200 at the grocery store. And that's a normal thing when you're feeding a household for a couple of weeks, especially in this day and age with the economy the way it is.
Well, if I change my behaviors, if I do better, this life, looking out into the future could be pretty awesome. What can I do to change to make this work? Is that why you
100%. So that it's gaslighting, right? The gaslighting that took place where he had told me that I had remembered situations differently and that how they actually were was the way that he told me they were. So the gaslighting really affected my mental well-being, my mental health, and it did make me think that I was at fault for a lot of the instances and abuses that happened.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the AmP&x podcast today. I'm Cynthia Motters, the host, and today our guest is Michelle Jewsbury, and we're going to learn more about her exciting background, which is she's very accomplished in many areas, and she has a very interesting story to tell. And for those of you who don't know, the AmP&x brand is all about shining a light on abuse. And so through our podcast, we like to have people come on as guests and share their stories in hopes that people can have takeaways or learn or pick up on some of the red flags that they may not have seen. So click and like or subscribe to our page. We'd love to have you join us. We're going to have a lot more of this in the future. This is our third one. And a little bit about the brand. I'm partnered with Robin Beemant, and it's a lifestyle brand. It started with our AmP&x pendants here, which you can see here. And for every one of these that we sell, we donate $1 to Peace Over Violence, and they provide transportation to somebody in an abusive situation. So with that, Michelle, you are an accomplished author. You wrote a book, but I love him. You're an actress. You wrote a solo play. I mean, I'm just so amazed at all the things you did. And then you also started Unsilenced Voices, correct?
Yes.
Like, if that wasn't enough to write a book and do your own play, but you also started this whole organization. And I know we spoke a little bit earlier, and there was a situation that kind of prompted that. And I think what's so wonderful is that you took that and didn't say, well, I got out of that situation and off I go to my acting career and I'll write books. But you said, what can I do from this experience? How can I share it and empower and protect and, teach other women? So maybe you could just give us a little bit about your background, and then we'll talk about how it started and the story.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Cindy, for having me. Looking forward to speaking to your audience. I know that this is a prevalent issue that happens in societies all around the globe. So very excited to share. As Cindy said, my name is Michelle Jewsbury, and I'm a global breakthrough specialist. I was born in a small town in North Idaho to two amazing parents. My mom and my dad are no longer with us, but I still feel them every day saying, go girl, go, you've got this. They were always my biggest supporters. Growing up, I knew that I wanted something even more with my life. I remember pursuing an acting career very early on and moving to Hollywood, California to make my dreams come true. And it was
like so many young girls, right? Like
yes,
everybody
right,
wants to make that journey.
exactly. And I remember, shoot, I moved to Hollywood. This was August 2011, and I ended up meeting somebody roughly January 2012 that began to pursue me in a romantic relationship. And we'll call him Paul. And
Mhm.
he sent me gifts and flowers, took me to ball games, took me to
Was he
concerts.
somebody you were like auditioning with? Like,
No,
because
no,
I think of the classic Hollywood story, right? You come from the Midwest, you come to Hollywood, you want to break into the business. And I think that's where some of these, I don't know if the right word is predators, but they prey on women or
casting couches. They're called casting couches. And yeah,
there
they
you go.
happen often. Paul was not part of those casting couches that were offered to me, but unfortunately, Cindy is right. There are a lot of offers being presented, especially in Los Angeles, about, hey, I'll give you this role if you give me this. No, but Paul was different. Paul was somebody who I had actually met through a social media platform years prior and stayed in contact with me. And, when he started pursuing me in a romantic gesture, I didn't see any of the red flags surrounding domestic violence. And then I said yes to start dating him. And he ended up putting my head through a wall roughly about 4 months into that relationship. So it wasn't necessarily the looking at my phone, but it was the constant, oh, who you hanging out with? What are you up to today? Let's make sure to hang out together. And then the constant, I want to say, degrading of some of my friends and association. So especially when it came to my church affiliation, he said, why are you going to that church? They're all hypocrites and liars. Other red flags include him wanting to always have money on him and me not carry a purse. So he wanted to always take care of everything, but he didn't want me to carry anything. So he was very controlling in that manner. And when the emotional manipulation and psychological manipulation started, I was unaware of it because I never saw it in my family. My mom and my dad were the love story of our town. And growing up, my daddy never raised his fist. My mom or dad really didn't even yell at each other.
So
And
you weren't even exposed to it. So it's like
no.
you were kind of naive to it because how would you, expect it, right? You don't expect it. It comes out from left field.
And a lot of times people believe that domestic violence happens to less affluent or economically challenged individuals. And that's not the case. You actually have very affluent women and men getting trapped in domestic violence relationships. And a lot of it is because they're scared, one, because the person that they're with has a lot of power. But two, sometimes they didn't even experience any type of violence. And that was my case. I was very unaware of what I was going through. So when he kept telling me that I had triggered him, that it was my fault, I really believed that it was.
Well, if I change my behaviors, if I do better, this life, looking out into the future could be pretty awesome. What can I do to change to make this work? Is that why you stayed in it?
100%. So that it's gaslighting, right? The gaslighting that took place where he had told me that I had remembered situations differently and that how they actually were was the way that he told me they were. So the gaslighting really affected my mental well-being, my mental health, and it did make me think that I was at fault for a lot of the instances and abuses that happened.
Right. And did you share this with a girlfriend to say, hey, I got to tell you something, Paul was, he kind of pushed me up against the wall and I was scared and, did
So
you, yeah.
when I first started speaking up, this was after, so October of 2012, he had beat me so bad that I couldn't leave the house for weeks.
Oh my
Because I was
gosh.
black and blue. It was really bad. And after that time, I ended up going to a mutual friend of ours, a woman, we'll call her Jay. And
Yeah.
she used to talk with me. She didn't tell me that I was in the wrong for staying, but she encouraged me to break free. And she would be my not my billboard, my backboard, where I was able to communicate with her and tell her things that were going on. And she would she gave me encouragement, even like to hide credit cards in my boots when I was wearing boots, hide an ID so I could run quickly from Paul if he was viciously starting to attack me. And that happened quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, because you know, that's one of the scary things, I think, in a situation like this. You really don't know how bad this can escalate. And
Yeah,
we've heard those stories where, you know, women unfortunately have been killed because, you know, they didn't think it would get to that depth.
yeah, and a lot of people don't know that the most difficult time in any abusive situation is when the survivor or the one being abused tries to escape the relationship. That's when in more cases than not, the survivor, the abused, is actually killed. And in this case, we're talking about a woman, myself, and I remember leaving 7 or 8 different times and going back. And typically you do leave about 7 times before finally breaking free from that situation. But each time I was so scared that he was going to come after me because he told me he would. There was one time even that he had followed me in one of his cars, very close behind me. I guess he had a Go Find My Phone app on his phone, and he tracked me halfway to Los Angeles. And finally he backed off. And he told me this later, and he may have lied. However, I think that he was probably telling me the truth, and it did scare the heck out of me. Scared the bejesus out of me.
When
right?
you said you met him through social media, I mean, did you have any, like, let me check the background, or, you know, did he have did he talk about ex-girlfriends to say, oh yeah, I had a long-term relationship and it was great?
So when I say I met him through social media, I had actually met him 2 years prior to that at an in-person event, like a network marketing event. And I had joined a social media site, and because I had joined that years ago, this was 2011, it sent out an email to everybody in my contacts, and Paul was in my contacts. So he actually started speaking to me via email, but it was because of that platform. Now, I did talk to him, to answer your question, about former girlfriends. And he did tell me he did have a former girlfriend, but she was crazy. That's what he told me,
it was
right?
her.
She was crazy. So I didn't really investigate too much into that because I was never aware of a domestic violence situation happening to me or any other woman that I had met in my life.
Yeah, you can't even fathom, like, so why would your mind even go there, right? Like,
you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, well, we don't go into a relationship and say, aha, let me see if this wonderful man I'm dating, you know, beat his ex-girlfriend. Like, we just don't. We're like feeling good. We're having a great time, and you start to love this person, and then kind of runs away from it.
It's interesting to understand that when you go through experiences, you then can help other people do the same. So to talk about that, Cindy, I mean, this is what I teach on now. Look for the red flags, use social media. We have a computer at our fingertips right now. Just go on and Google whomever you're going on a date with. Don't, you know, go someplace alone the first time. Make sure to do a background check, talk to their friends and family. It's very easy to find out what somebody has been up to.
Well, and I think, like you said earlier, also pick up on things like if they're trying to alienate you from your church, your friends, or maybe degrading the people in your circle. I mean, maybe that's because they don't want you to have those close connections and they kind of want to keep you isolated. And that would be like a big red flag, right?
Yes, that is actually one of the red flags. And then the next stage after that is the isolation process. So I was living in Los Angeles, and he had encouraged me and pushed me to move up north with him, further and further away from my congregation and my friends. He told me oftentimes that I shouldn't speak to my family as much. And I didn't tell my family what was going on, but my mom and my dad were my best friends. My family knew everything about me, and I did hide this for quite some time from them. When my daddy passed away is when I finally actually came out. So
did you hide it? Did you hide it because you thought in the back of your mind, this is going to get better, I'm going to fix him? He didn't mean it those last 3 times. I know that if I put the work in, you know, we could have that happy relationship. So why bother my parents with this trauma?
You nailed it. That's exactly what it was, because you're in this a fantasy relationship, this relationship that you're praying for in your life, because out of the 30 days, 28 was good. So you're thinking that maybe I can change him. Maybe there's just things in his life that he needs my help with. And he even had told me that a few times, like, you're the only one I can trust, Michelle. You're the only one that I love, Michelle. And it is psychological manipulation, believing that that is truth coming from an abuser, and believing that you can actually change somebody is not an accurate determination, because you can't. They have to make the change on their own.
I mean, I think that says it all, right? So many women say, oh, but I love him, and he really deeply does love me, right? And so you try to come up with this reasoning, this kind of false sense of reasoning as to why you can stay together, because there's this true love. But in a sense, I don't think it's love at all. I mean, I think it's not love. It's self-centeredness, it's control, it's maybe narcissism on his part. It's a whole bunch of other stuff.
A lot of codependence, for sure. You know, I so badly wanted a relationship like that, and I still say to this day that it was the best and worst of my life, because we really did have a strong desire to love each other, but didn't necessarily know how to fully love each other. And he had so many issues that he needed to deal with that he thought he could handle on his own, and then they came out in physical and emotional violence towards the people that he loved. And me being so naive, not really understanding the cycle of domestic violence, what was really going on, I stayed thinking that I could be his rock and help him through it. So that was a yin and yang, a codependent right there. Yes, he was narcissist. Yes, he always thought about himself and changed everything that was about me, right? He changed it to be about him. Yeah. And unfortunately, this happens to so many relationships, especially when you go overseas. I remember going to Accra, Ghana, one of my first trips to Ghana. And we went up to the Timene tribe, and the women actually said, well, if my husband doesn't beat me, then it means he doesn't love me. And that's a cultural thing, right? It's a cultural misunderstanding. And it's only through education that we can actually change the way that people see love.
Yeah. Now, you, on that note, you started Unsilenced Voices, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
You're talking a lot about my book. I ended up publishing my book. I started working on that thing back in 2017. And in 2017, I also felt a calling from God to do something with my story. I was brought up as a strong, independent woman. My mom and dad raised me to speak my mouth, speak my mind. So when I had escaped my relationship, I actually turned my story into a one-woman play, performed that in 2016, and then began working on my book after that. I actually didn't publish until 2019 because I was in a lawsuit with Paul. But back in 2017, I felt God say, you need to do something even more. And I was like, okay, what do I do? And I've always had a heart for Africa and giving back. So I began to volunteer on Skid Row at the Downtown Women's Center, learning more about domestic violence issues. Unfortunately, over 1/3 of the women on Skid Row are there because of domestic violence. And I knew that I wanted to help in some capacity when it came to abuse, because I was able to speak my experience, and that helps so many people.
Right.
And lo and behold, God had a different plan. And I ended up flying to Oakland for an interview with another nonprofit where I felt God's presence, but didn't feel like I was supposed to be there. And then from there, I was like, what do I do? And he sent me a gentleman, and we just started talking. I was on Pier 39, drinking a glass of wine and eating clam chowder. And I told this guy my story, and he said, you need to start a nonprofit. And I said, now's the time I should listen. So that's what I did.
And so you started the nonprofit in 2012?
No, I escaped my abusive relationship in 2015.
Okay.
I started the relationship in 2012, began the nonprofit in 2017, July 2017.
Okay. And predominantly you're helping a lot of women in Africa, right? With that.
And the US. So in 2022, we were in Ghana, Sierra Leone, Rwanda, and the USA. So we do the bulk of our programming primarily in Sierra Leone. We have almost 50 girls on a wait list. We help almost 30 girls through vocational training that have been involved in human trafficking, sexual abuse, and domestic violence cases. Many of them aged 12 to 19, all have children. It's very interesting to see the change with them, and it's beautiful. But we do a lot of work there. In the US last year, we actually did a 4-city tour called the Blanket of Hope, where we went to Dallas, Vegas, Los Angeles, and Tampa, where we impacted and collaborated with other organizations within the cities that we went to. We partnered with Amazon Workforce Staffing to provide job opportunities to survivors in the area. And we also gifted $33,000 to 26 US survivors last year alone for transportation and relocation needs. Yes.
Yeah.
So we definitely need as much help as humanly possible. So if you are watching this, please go to unsilencedvoices.org. Again, unsilencedvoices.org. You can get involved, get the help that you need, become a sponsor, help us track down funding and donors, and really start making a huge difference.
And where can they find your book?
So you can go to amazon.com to find my book. You can also go to unsilencemyvoice.com. Again, it's unsilencemyvoice.com.
And the book, is it, I know it's your story, but are there tools and things that you elaborate in the book, or is it more just about what you went through?
So the book is primarily my story and how I got out. So the tools that I share in the book would be more mental well-being, thought processes, how I was able to overcome. If you visit the Unsilence My Voice, I actually have programs. I've worked with my team to create legacy camp programs, masterclass programs, intensives to help people really overcome.
Yeah. So before we close out, I'd love for you to just say how you did get out and what was the breaking point.
Yeah.
And then I know you had to go through a legal situation.
I did. Yes.
So, which is a little unusual for some, but yeah.
Yeah. So there's always a breaking point in the cycle of domestic violence. And for me, that breaking point was when I found out that I had that Paul was having affairs on me. He was cheating on me with multiple women, and deep down inside, I was like, well, I allowed you to physically and emotionally harm me, financially abuse me, but now you cheat on me, and I couldn't handle it. And so I actually was he let me go for a while back to LA. And that's when I started to discover, wow, this relationship is really bad. I really started to just document things that happened to me. And then he put another woman's head through our bathroom window, and she contacted me. And that's when I said, enough is enough. And that's when I took legal action against my abuser. And we settled. And I know that I wasn't able, because of the statute of limitations, to file criminal charges, but I did file civil, which gave me my voice back. And, you know, to end this, I know that we have to end here pretty soon. I always say how I got out was because I just kept swimming. You know, like in the movie Finding Nemo, Dory always says to herself, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. And that's what you got to do. You just got to keep going.
And don't give up. And I think you also just said another really important thing, like you chronicled the things that were happening. And I think if you put from your mind to paper, and then maybe you take a look at that, you can reflect on the severity of it a little more. Yeah. Instead of just pushing it under the rug and saying, well, you know, but I love him, or it's okay. But I think if you write it down and it would be like, wow, you know, this happened. It's an aha moment. Yeah, 100%. When I started writing and I read it back, and I was like, Michelle went through this. Michelle, what? And you probably were shocked by, like, how did I let myself go through that? I'm not that kind of woman. You said you had great parents. You know, you're a go-getter. You're confident, but yet you're probably like, how did I allow myself to get in this situation? Yes, just like so many others may
be experiencing, which then causes you to stay in a lot of cases. And I encourage you to still break free, no matter that fear of being judged.
I love that you've taken all your learnings and you're just going down all these different avenues to promote this, to create awareness, to provide toolkits for women. I just think that's awesome. So thank you, Michelle, so much. And thank you for being our guest on the AmP&x podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
For everyone tuning in, thank you. And please click and subscribe to our channel. Bye, everyone.
Another thing is jealousy, which you and I chatted about, and that's something that sometimes we think is kind of cute. Like, oh, my boyfriend was one of my exes, very, very jealous. And it was kind of like, oh, he really cares. It's like, no, that's not love. That's control. There's a difference, and it's not healthy. And jealous type people will also isolate their victims, right? Where they will try to get them away from family and friends because they are jealous and they want total control. They want that person to be dependent on them. So that kind of goes hand in hand. Yeah. Another is makes you feel special 1 minute, like you are the most special person. You are a queen, right? Yeah. You are the top dog. But literally in the next breath or the next week or the next month, right? It's this up and down. Yeah. And then there's the reconciliation where they're desperately trying to get you back, right? So that's where the really mind twist comes from.